I was so impressed with this, I got to talk with and had lunch with the guy who did all of the original research on Paw Paw. It's Dr. Jerry McLaughlin. I'll talk about him in a moment. But I was so impressed when he told me about this banana-tasting fruit. 2 years ago, I planted them in my garden. This year, I should get my first crop. They say it's like a, huh?
How many years did it take?
3 years. This is the third year. And so I'm assuming, if this miserable weather we're having doesn't affect it, that this year I will get my first crop of Paw Paw. They say it's sort of like a banana custard. And it grows from mid-Atlantic up to about here. And so I've got it growing, and I'm pretty sure that this year I'll get it. Paw Paw is exceptional. I can did so many stories recently on this one. Selective for abnormal cells. It's a fancy way of saying cancer. Cancer is an abnormal cell. This will selectively go after the abnormal cells. It slows the production of ATP. That's what feeds these bad cells. And so it robs them of their energy. Exclusively through Nature's Sunshine until recently, because this has been researched medically and through the Cancer Society, they will recommend it with chemo, with radiation. We say try it alone. Or if you have to take some of these other things, it's your choice. It will work with it, and you can cut down on the amount of the chemo and radiation. And that's medically sound. Anti-tumor, antiviral, anthelmintic. I may have that pronounced wrong. That's for parasites and worms that you get in the colon. Basically, up here, what ATP stands for, took me a while, I didn't understand it. He said it's like a spark plug that misfires. And that same person I was talking to, who was a medical doctor, said it shows an this is in quotes, an inhibitory activity over 1 billion times the potency. Somebody knows this, tell me. But the drug name was andromycin, a standard anti-cancer drug. Now, this I took off of the internet. You might want to do this yourself. It was Paw Paw from discovery to clinical trials. This is new, so I'm still collecting info on it. Professor McLaughlin, 34 years as professor, 28 years at Purdue, head of their research department, 24 years working for the National Cancer Institute, $5 million from them in studying Paw Paw. He did research from plants from all over the world. Paw Paw, he said, was by far the best. I'm reading from my notes from watching this video, or YouTube. Paw Paw dash from discovery to clinical trials. Graviola is an herb that a lot of people are talking about now. This is so much more powerful than graviola. He says you can't even compare it. He lectured at Nature's Sunshine. We wanted to get rid of him because he's a research scientist. His words were this long, and he had no animation, and it was like, get him off of there, because we didn't know what was going on. But he is a tremendous... The reason he came to Nature's Sunshine was Nature's Sunshine agreed, after seeing all the research, that they would make the Paw Paw extract. And we were the first and only company to have it until a couple of years ago.
What's his name again?
Dr. Jerry McLaughlin. All right, he said there are 50 active compounds in Paw Paw. On the video, if you watch it, you see it. It's nothing but peaks. When you deal with that drug I just mentioned, they will take one of those peaks, and that's what they have to do for medical research. They can't do the plant. That's not patentable. And they take one of those peaks, and then they will study it, costing millions of dollars. And if they get a little bit of result, they patent it, and you've got a new drug. That was the one that I was just talking about here, that andromycin, which is one of the major cancer drugs on the market, but it's one peak out of 50. And he says it's the combination that makes it work. Now here's another point that he mentioned on there. He's not with Nature's Sunshine. He is a professor. We did do what he wanted because they wouldn't do it where in the medical profession. He mentions the attention that Nature's Sunshine puts to detail. I've got to tell a little bit of story there. He said, the part you use is the twigs. You don't use the bark, you don't use the fruit, you don't use the roots. Those are all the normal deal. But the twigs. He found that as he was researching, he and all his colleagues. And they recently, it works on worms, it works on parasites, it works on lice. There's so many different things it works on. He said the list is practically endless. And they had a tremendous problem with a spruce bug in Canada. I have to look at the notes. So he got 110 pounds of twigs and made out the formula, and he sent it up to Canada to deal with these spruce bugs. Total failure. Didn't do a thing. So he said that's the reason they call it research. You search, and when something doesn't work, you go back and research it. This was the interesting point. The twigs must be harvested between May and June. That's the only time the active ingredients are there. Notice the pattern here. We've talked about the garlic, we've talked about the alfalfa, we've talked about the ginger. It's getting from the right spot, the right time, the right part. And so in this case, the twigs have to be harvested in May and June. He had a chart. It showed here we are in April, May, June, July, August. The active ingredient disappears. When he did it, he knew that it worked, so he just gathered up the twigs and sent them, and it didn't work. So he went back to work. He even made the comment there that Nature's Sunshine checks it for the active ingredients. They only will take it between May and June. And even there, he said, what you run into, and he's not from Nature's Sunshine, but he was using them because they had some of the background. He said, he also has the areas where they have all the trees. He says, and from tree to tree, the active ingredients will vary. Not terribly, as much as they will with the time of harvesting, but he said what Nature's Sunshine would do if they had some that was a little bit lower from that tree at the right time, they would add a little bit more so that it was always a consistent level. Attention to detail, yes?
So my guess is that Nature's Sunshine basically produces Paw Paw capsules one time a year.
One time a year, and it's got to last. Fortunately, twigs have a long shelf life. So you got to try to figure out how much you need and harvest it at that time. Just some side points that would be of interest to you. I have a couple of customers who were quite old. They were dealing with breast cancer. That's one of the things he mentions in the deal. It's particularly good there. And that's all they used. They refused everything in the way of radiation and chemo. He covers that too and shows how dangerous it is. But they are cancer-free. And they were only using Paw Paw.